Welcome to a new podcast, webcast. I don't know what we're going to call this thing, but we are going to call it Dynamo Thoughts. And this is a spin-off from BIM Thoughts, and this is your host, Bill DeBevick, and I am joined by Ian Siegel, who was on BIM Thoughts a while ago. And after that episode, I asked him if he would like to start this new thing called Dynamo Thoughts with me, and he said yes. So welcome and thank you, Ian, for joining me today on Dynamo Thoughts.
Of course. Thanks for the invitation. I'm looking forward to jumping into Dynamo with you.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So Ian is our official co-host. I don't know if that makes a difference or not, but he is indeed our official guy. And if you don't know who Ian Siegel is, shame on you. He does a lot of the Dynamo training on lynda.com. He's also very influential in the Dynamo world. And as you get more into the Dynamo world, you'll probably find more and more of Ian out there. And so what we wanted to do with Dynamo Thoughts is something a little bit different than all those other training videos you've watched, in that I'm going to have Ian show me how to do something, and then I'm going to repeat it afterwards. We're going to try to keep these down to 15, 20 minutes of a video session and just focus just on one particular topic.
And then after Bill does it on his screen, you could go ahead and do it on your own screen.
Absolutely.
At your home or your office, wherever you've got Dynamo and maybe Revit installed.
Right. That's the idea. The idea is for, well, me to be selfish and learn Dynamo using Ian here, but to share that love so that you can learn it as well as the listener and viewer. So we're going to make this a video thing so you can see what's going on. It's going to be fantastic.
Yep. So we're going to start at 0 Dynamo proficiency and work our way up, as high as we can go, I guess.
And so we're using Revit 2017 today, and we're using Dynamo 1.1. We're going to try to keep these videos to the shipping version of the product as opposed to betas or daily builds. We want to try to keep it with the one that you would download for yourself.
That's right.
I thought the first one we would do is the customary first programming thing, which is Hello World. And so I asked Ian to show me how to do Hello World in 3D text in a Revit family. So let's go ahead and get started.
All right. So yeah, exactly like you said, very first exercise in any sort of programming language or programming exercise, we need to do a Hello World. And like you said, we'll start off in a family environment. So I'm just going to go ahead and start a new, I'll just do a generic model Revit family. Just a quick jump ahead to save you maybe some time. Once you do fire up Dynamo, if you wanted to make model text, the only place that you can do that is actually in a family. You wouldn't be able to do 3D model text in a Revit project using Dynamo at this point in time. So I'm just kind of saving you the agony if you are interested in doing some 3D model text. Start off in a family instead of a project. So my family here is all loaded up. I'm also going to fire up Dynamo. We're going to come back over to the family editor in a minute here. If you're like me and you're used to using Dynamo before Revit 2017, you're going to go to the Add-ins tab, but it's not there anymore. Now it's under Manage. So I'm going to fire up Dynamo under the Manage tab. There we are. All right, so Dynamo's fired up. I'm just going to do a brand new home workspace.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the programs in Dynamo are called workspaces?
That's right. Sometimes they're referred to as graphs, and when you're creating a brand new project, it's this portion of Dynamo is called the workspace.
Okay.
I'm going to maximize Dynamo for a second. We'll come back to Revit in a few minutes here. So before we get too far into it, let's kind of roadmap out what we're about to do. We're going to create a brand new instance of model text in Revit, but the whole thing is going to happen in Dynamo. So we're going to place whatever nodes onto our workspace that we have to in order to generate a new model text instance that reads Hello World.
Sounds good to me.
So in order to get started, this is kind of the overwhelming aspect, especially if it's your first time in Dynamo. Where do I begin? We've got our node library that's filled with all these nodes that we've never heard of or seen before. A good place that I usually recommend to start out is up here at the search bar. We know that at the end of this graph, we're going to want to create some model text. So I'm just going to start off by searching for model text and see what comes up and what our options are. So you can see as I start to type, our list of all the nodes in the library filters down to just a few here. What we'll want to pay a little bit of attention to, you'll notice if I hover over any one of these nodes, we get a flyout that describes what the node might do. Pay extra close attention to these little icons. Here we've got a blue question mark, we've got a green plus sign, a red thunderbolt. Those are a good indication of what that node does. If it's a question mark, a lot of times you're asking a question. You're asking something about something that's already in Dynamo. If you're creating something brand new, you're looking for a green plus sign most of the time. So in this case, we're not interested in selecting model text, but we are interested in creating brand new model text in the family document by a couple of these inputs. So this is just by kind of reading some of these descriptions here, I'm able to see, okay, we want to create new model text. It's a green plus, and it lives in the Revit library. That's what this italic text is about. So this seems like it's dead on. We want to create a brand new model text element. So I'm going to click there, and it drops a brand new model text element onto our workspace. So far, so good?
So far, so good.
All right.
When I've done programming in the past, it's always been, text-based. It hasn't been this nifty graphic stuff. And I've always started with the beginning parts of, okay, I need to attach to this. I need to set what my coordinates are, blah, 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 blah. In Dynamo, it looks like we start sort of in the middle. We want to put in our model text. We know we want to do that. And then it looks like right here, this box is telling us what information we need to tell the model text in order to put it on the screen.
That's right. That's right. If you did know exactly what you needed to start with, and then your middle, and then your end, you could certainly write your Dynamo script that way. But one of the advantages of visual programming is that you don't need to start at the top and work your way down. You can start in the middle, or start with the part that you know, and then work your way outward until the script does what you need.
And work your way out. Right, because, I'm looking at some of these Dynamo graphs, now that I'm knowing the lingo. And I look at these and go, how did they know how to begin? And you look at all of these wires and all of these things all over the place as I'm moving my arms all around the area. And I see all of this stuff all over the place. How the heck do they know how to start? Now it makes sense. They started in the middle and worked their way out.
That's right. That's right. So that's what we're going to do here. We're dead in the middle. Actually, we're starting at the end and working our way backwards in this case.
Okay.
So we've dropped in a node that we know, after we give it the right information, is going to create model text based on the description that we read. So on our left hand, just a little bit of Dynamo 101. On our left hand of the node, these are all of the inputs that the node is asking for. So this node is going to run one function. It's going to perform that function very well if we give it all the right information. And then on the right side is the output. So it's going to generate a model text Revit element on the right hand side. But we're mostly interested right now in all of these inputs. What are the things that we need to give this node in order to generate some model text? So I'm going to start with the text input. Now if I hover over this guy, you can see there's a little preview that flies out to the left called string. That's giving you a hint about what type of information needs to go into that input.
Okay.
So this input is asking for a string, which is programmer speak for text. It's a string of characters that make up a word or a sentence, or in this case, hello world. So we need to create a string object that we can pass into that text input.
Can I click on that word that says string right there and add a string?
I can. As soon as I went to go click on it, it disappeared. So it disappeared. We don't need to interact with that. That's just a tooltip. Hint for you.
Yeah, that would be cool though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I could see some potential there. We'll get the Dynamo developers on the podcast in the future. Hey, how come I can't click on these things? We've got some ideas for what it might do if we did. So I'm going to go ahead and point you in the direction of where you can usually create a lot of these brand new inputs. So we want to create a new string input. So I'm going to go to the core section of the node library. I'm going to click on that core button, and I'm going to click input. Now under input, these are a couple different data types. You could see string. We could also create things like numbers. We could have a number slider, which is a button that you kind of click and drag, and it changes the number that's coming out. So this is where you can go to create brand new input objects. So in this case, we want to drop in a string because that's what the text input asked us for. So I'm going to click on that string node in the library, and you can see it drops it right into the middle of the canvas. I'm going to click and drag. I'm holding my mouse down in order to move the nodes around, and there's our string input, right? So when I click in the light gray box in the string input, now you can see I've got my text editor. I can now type whatever I want. So we want this model text to read hello world. So I'm going to go ahead and type hello world. If I hit enter, it adds another line. So enter is not going to get us out of this string input. I'm going to delete that enter. I'm just going to click off in space, kind of click away from that string input node. And now I'm done editing the text that goes into the string input.
Okay.
And now that I've created the string, I can click on the right-handed arrow out of that string node. That's the output of our new string object, our hello world text. And I could click on the text input on the model text node. And now we've connected that piece of information from our string input to the text input of the model text node.
Okay.
And we can see that we've got that connection because there's a wire here. See that? We can now move this node wherever we want, and that string text is connected to the text input. All right, so we've filled in our first piece of information to create this model text. Now it's asking us for a sketch plane. Think for a second if you were to go into Revit and create a new model text object. In fact, let's do that. If we were to go ahead back into our Revit family and create a new model text instance, it's going to ask us a couple things. First, what's the text that we want to enter? So we've already done this step in Dynamo, right? We've already said we wanted to say hello world. But the next step, and maybe you don't think about this unless you're an experienced Revit user, you want to make sure that you're placing this text on the right work plane. You would set your work plane before you placed this model text object, right? So when Dynamo is asking us for a sketch plane, that's really what it's asking us for. It's what is the plane in the Revit environment that you're about to place this new model text object into. In this case, I'm looking at my reference floor plan. Maybe I'll drop this piece of model text in, and I've kind of committed this piece of model text to basically the floor plan plane, the XY plane in the XYZ coordinate system. So let's go back to Dynamo, and we'll define that XY sketch plane so that we don't have to do that inside of Revit, right? We want Dynamo to generate every aspect of this model text. Now,
So the sketch plane is like the floor plan or like the front elevation or the side. It's where it's going to live in 3D space as far as rotation and depth.
pretty close. It's more specifically, it's the work plane that this model text is hosted to, because it could be at an angle. You could make a reference plane or a reference line or something like that. So this is where we define exactly where in XYZ space is this text going to be hosted to.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and I'll navigate. I'll kind of, so again, we don't know how to create a sketch plane. I'm going to start to type sketch plane, and it looks like we have a couple options here. We've got plane, biplane. They all look like they live in this Revit section of the node library. So I'm going to cancel this search for just a second. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. And it's, since we are interacting with Revit, I want to make sure that I see all of the nodes that are available to me. So I'll click on Revit. We're working with Revit elements. And specifically, we are asking to create a sketch plane. So here's our sketch plane portion of the node library. So we've got these three nodes that are all about sketch planes in Revit. This is how we can, looks like this is how we create a new sketch plane, or we could ask a couple of questions or things about sketch planes, but we want to create a brand new sketch plane. And the fact that there's only one option narrows it down nicely for us. So let's just go ahead and drop that sketch plane by plane node in. All right, so you can see that comes into our work plane. We know that we're going to hook our sketch plane up to our model text node, but you could see that we need to provide a little bit more information in order to create a sketch plane. Now we're asked by Dynamo for a plane. So what's the difference between a sketch plane and a plane? You could see here, if I'm looking in my Revit section of the node library, I don't see anything about planes. We've got sketch planes, but that's kind of it. A plane lives under a big long list of the geometry node library. So geometry in Dynamo is actually its own totally different modeling environment. It connects to Revit, but the Dynamo geometry library is how you can build up all kinds of geometry that really only exist inside of Dynamo until we do something like hook it up to a sketch plane node, or maybe we hook it up to walls or a form, or we kind of like bake whatever geometry we're working on in Dynamo out to Revit. So the way that we can create a plane object is actually we need to define a plane inside of Dynamo, which is then going to kind of take form as a sketch plane in Revit. So here I am under geometry. I'm going to search for our plane library. And now we have all these different options for creating brand new planes. We know that we want to place this model text on basically flat on the floor, kind of like your level 1 floor plane. So I'll just click on the XY plane. And you can see this node doesn't have any inputs. So we've kind of gone all the way to the top. You can see that the header of this node is a darker gray than the sketch plane node because it has all the information it needs. We're ready to go ahead and plug that geometry plane into the Revit sketch plane node. And now we've got all the information that we need in order to create a sketch plane, basically define our work plane in Revit. Does that make sense?
That sketchplane.xy is the one we're actually seeing graphically on the screen as well.
Oh, by coincidence, yeah, you're right. That is where we tend to see that.
Right. Was that little box there before?
It wasn't. And we can be sure because when we click on the XY plane, this plane highlights in Dynamo.
Right.
That's right.
Okay.
And Dynamo comes with these planes that just come out of the box. You can see here if I drop in an XZ plane, now we've got basically your front elevation plane.
Right.
YZ would be the plane formed by the Y and the Z axis. So that's how these planes all work inside of Dynamo.
And then if I threw a XZ plane in there and just wired it to plane, it would change it where the 3D text lived by itself, because we would change which plane it came in. Okay.
That's right. Maybe once we finish placing all of our inputs into the model text node, we can experiment by switching out some of these inputs and seeing what it does to the model text.
Okay.
So we've got our sketch plane defined. Next, we have to define what the X and the Y coordinates are within that sketch plane. So think back to when we created this Hello World model text a minute ago. First, we typed in "Hello World" was the text we wanted to place. Then we defined that we wanted to place it flat on the XY plane. And then the next step was to choose where on that XY plane we wanted to place the model text. So you're setting the X and the Y axis on that plane for where this text will live. And that's what we're about to do in Dynamo now too. So if we hover over the X coordinate and plane input, you could see our little flyout tells us that it's asking for a double. A double is another programming term. This is a number that is allowed to be a decimal. It's basically a number that's not an integer. There are two numbers that kind of make up a decimal. There's the number before the decimal place and after the decimal. So that's why it's called a double. Now in order to create a new number input, we could go right back to our core input section of the node library. And I'll just drop in a number. And you can see by default that number is a 0.
That's got decimals in it, so we know that's a double.
That's right.
If I search for double, would it have found it?
That's a good question. It does.
Yeah.
It's not called a double node, but at least the developers of Dynamo knew that people were probably going to go searching for a double, and all you need is a number or a number slider or some type of node like that.
Okay. And 0, 0 is probably a fine spot.
Exactly right. So let's plug in our 0 as the X coordinate. Now, if I want to, I could drop in another number in order to feed the Y coordinate, but since we want the 0 to function for both of those inputs, we could just hook that 0 up to X and Y, and that number is just kind of being passed to both of those inputs.
Okay.
Our next step is to define the depth of the text, which is asking for another double. Chances are this is going to be a slightly different number than 0, so I'll drop in maybe one more of these number inputs. You know what? Let's have some fun. Let's drop in a number slider. I'm going to delete that number input by hitting the delete button. Here we've got a number slider. So this input is still going to create a number, but we get to define a couple things. We get to say what's the minimum value of that number. Maybe it's 0, and maybe we don't want this number to be any bigger than, let's say, 10. So I'm going to type 10 there. And we've got this.
And that's going to be in our, whatever our units are, right? So if our units in Revit is 10 feet, it'd be 10 feet. And if our units were millimeters, would it be 10 millimeters?
That's
Or
exactly
would it
right.
still be 10 feet? Okay.
It would be, yeah, so Dynamo is going to adopt whatever your Revit units are, and that's what it's going to pass. So in this case, let's just kind of say, I don't know, 2.9 sounds good. It's a double. Dynamo should accept that number as our text depth. And now we have one last input. We've got our number slider defined. Our last input is to specify the model text type. So hopping back over to...
And that would be like the style in AutoCAD terms.
Exactly, right. Now in Revit terms, it would be which type of model text do you want to use. So if we had, I don't know, if we had developed more types, maybe different fonts or different different sizes, things like that, we'd give it a new type name. Right now, the only type loaded into the out-of-the-box template is model text 1. But that is the name of the type that we're looking for. So model text 1. Let's keep that in mind. And I'm going to hop back over to Dynamo. Now, if I hover over the model text type input, you could see it's not asking for another string like we might have thought. It's asking very specifically for a model text type. So if we look back at our Revit section of the node library, we're still working with Revit elements. We're done with our sketch plane. Here you can see there's a specific section of the node library just for model text types. And there's only one node under it. So I'm going to drop that one in. This is going to create a model text type. Well, I shouldn't say create. This green plus sign is a little misleading. What this is going to do is it's going to find a model text type in your Revit family based on the name of that type. So we can see that our output is model text type, which is definitely what we want to feed into the model text node. And you can see the node for a second thought it had all the information it needed, so it tried to run just because all of these inputs are plugged in. But of course, we haven't done anything to tell Dynamo what that model text type is yet, right? And that's what it's telling us. Is there's a problem here.
So when Dynamo gets mad, it turns orange.
Exactly. So try to keep...
As opposed to green, like the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, usually green means good, but in Dynamo, gray is good.
Yeah, green would be good. Right. Oh, so it's not really that angry. It's just sort of mad.
It's a little confused. It's like a yellow light. You can accelerate to make it through the light, or you can stop. You've got a decision to make. We still have decisions to make before things are either working or not working.
And so in this case, it's because the model text type by name doesn't have anything on its left side, because everything has to end on one end or another. We need to put in something for the name.
That's right. One way that you can see what information is coming out of a node is to hover over the node, and it kind of expands out what information is coming out of that node's output. So right now it's returning a function as opposed to something like this number slider, which is returning 2.9. This number is returning a 0. So exactly, we haven't gotten this node to do anything yet. So what we do need to tell it, now it's asking for a string, which is going to help Dynamo look into that Revit file and pick out the name of the model text type that we want to create this hello world model text instance with. So we'll drop one more string node in, or actually we already have one on the canvas. So I'm going to Control C on my keyboard and then Control V. So your kind of typical copy paste, and that creates an identical copy of the string that we had before. But instead of hello world, we want to define this was model text 1.
And if we left it at hello world and wired it up, then that other box probably would have turned yellow.
Probably.
Because it couldn't find.
And I'll tell you what, I'll just kind of delete a couple characters.
Yeah, let's try it.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, it turns yellow, right?
And that
says
that's
it can't find it.
Right, there is no Model T model text type that lives in
Right,
that
there is no
family.
Model T. So it doesn't like Ford cars.
I guess not, unless there was a model text type that was called Model T, and then it probably would like that type. But that's not that's not the file that we're working in here. So
Okay.
I'm about to kind of split my screen up between
hmm
Dynamo on one side and Revit on the other because what I want to see once I've got all the information plugged in properly.
hmm
If things did work the way that we expected, we should see a new Hello World model text appear in our Revit family. That would mean that
Okay.
we did everything that we set out to. So I'm going to go ahead and
hmm
instead of our Model T, let's call that Model Text 1 as we looked up
hmm
before. I'm going to click off in space here. And beautiful.
And it creates it. Now, what confused me a little bit now was that model text, or the model text by sketch plane, that has a little model text there on the right. I would have thought that that would have needed to be connected to Revit, is what I was thinking to myself.
You mean this portion of the library, this
No, the
portion of
other
the
part,
definition?
the part at the very, very end, the model text dot by text sketch plane, the big box. I would have thought we'd have to connect that to something.
Oh, the model text output.
Uh-huh.
Got it. Right, right. That's a good point. So you're absolutely right. This node, it is outputting some
Mm-hmm.
information here. Let's as a way of previewing what that what that output is by hovering over this node. I'm going to pin down our
Mm-hmm.
node preview here. So this is the information that's coming out of the node.
So if the model text isn't connected to anything, it's just going to throw it into the default, into the current Revit session.
Well, this model text output is the intention of this node is it's going to talk to whatever Revit session is running in the background. So
Okay.
even though it does seem like there's an extra step that needs to happen afterward, this
Mm-hmm.
is kind of just a courtesy. What we're seeing as the output, this is the element ID, this green highlighted number. This is the element
Okay.
ID of the Hello World model text instance that we
Mm-hmm.
just created. So if this was only a part of the graph that we were working on, maybe after we create this model text, we wanted to do something even further to this text inside of Revit. We can now
Mm-hmm.
use this model text instance as an output. That's what's coming out of the node here.
Oh,
And we could plug that into the inputs of more nodes downstream.
got it. Okay. Well, let me give it a try then.
All right.
See if I can figure it out. And I have Revit already started with a brand new generic model. And I have Dynamo loaded. And I've got the Manage tab. I'll click on Dynamo. And Dynamo launches. The first time I launched Dynamo earlier today, it asked me which version I wanted to run, the 0.09 or the 1.1. It didn't seem to ask me that this time, or maybe because I already had it open. No, it didn't seem to ask me that this time.
Right. If you open Dynamo and then you close your Revit session again, then it'll ask you again which version you
Oh,
want to
okay, so
use.
it asks you when Revit starts for the first time. Okay, that makes sense. All right, so I've done the split screen thing because I want to see what happens when it happens.
All right.
And I want
Excellent.
to create a new graph is what this is called.
That's
No,
right.
this is called a work,
Oh yeah, new graph, new workspace. Those terms are interchangeable.
and then the graph is what I'm going to create inside of the workspace. Okay. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to bring up what I want to make. So I'm going to type in 3D text. Whoops, text.
3D text.
And it didn't find it.
I guess not.
Let's just find text then. Let me type correctly.
Oh, we're
And
getting
there's
there.
that by sketch. We're getting there. What am I doing
Oh,
wrong?
that was it. I think
3D
I saw
text.
it. Model text. That's what we're looking for.
Model
So
text.
unfortunately, computers aren't yet at a point where they can kind of interpolate or figure out what we meant when we weren't dead on.
Right,
Unless there was somebody that programmed the computer to think that way, as we saw before
right,
with the double search, it knew to return number.
right. So it is called model text, and that's what it's called in Revit too, isn't it?
That's right.
It's called model text.
But humans can refer to that as 3D text, and we understand each other.
Right. And so this is now asking me for a string. So let's find with string.
That's
I'm going to
right.
be lazy and just click on these, undo the search.
I'll teach you an even one more shortcut beyond this.
A cooler way. Hello world.
Yep, hello world. Excellent.
The sketch plane.
Now, before you go and do your search for the sketch plane,
Uh-huh.
you could right-click right where your cursor is, anywhere in the background of your graph there, and that's going to
Uh-huh.
pull up a search bar wherever your cursor was.
Oh, look at that.
Save you a click there.
I was trying to click on that and see if it did anything. So I want to do a sketch plane. And there's plane right there. And that is indeed a sketch plane because it says input sketch plane right there. Right?
So let's drop
Oops.
that one in.
And
Oh, wait a second. So this node in particular,
that's
you
the
can
wrong.
see
Oh, that's the
it's
wrong
asking
one.
for a sketch plane, and it's going to tell you what the
Right.
Dynamo plane is.
We wanted that XY one because we wanted to tell it where the plane was. And there it is right
There's
there.
our XY plane. Excellent. Yep, let's drop that one in.
Oh, no. Nope, I did it wrong.
That's okay. We're going to need that one later. But that's okay. This is part of what the Dynamo experience is like. You'll drop something onto the canvas, think it needs to plug in, and you'll get a yellow node. And
Uh-huh.
so part of it is kind of
So that's
experimenting
mad.
with inputs. So this is...
No property can call plane. Oh, so that is indeed the wrong one.
Yeah, let's remove that one. Instead of... Oh, you
Okay.
know what? It's the one right below that one, which is going to create a new Revit sketch plane.
Oh, that's right, because I picked the one with the question mark instead of the plus. So it was asking which sketch plane instead of creating a sketch plane. I got it.
That's right. So I think
Oh, there it is
there
right
we
there
are.
by plane. And we'll wire this up.
There you go. And you could see that your inputs are named the same way too. Plane as
Okay.
the XY goes into plane as the input of sketch plane.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Excellent.
So what I did wrong there was I picked the one with the question mark instead of the one with the plus.
That's
Got it.
right.
Okay. I need to start paying attention instead of paying my bills. No, I need to pay my bills too.
You should probably pay both of those things.
That's right. And we need a double here because that's what it's asking for.
That's right.
I could have right-clicked and searched for double, but I didn't. And so we want a number.
That's right.
And there's my number. And we'll wire these both to the same one because we're going to put it 0, 0. If we wanted it at like 10, 5, we would have to put two numbers in
That's right.
and wire them to the right one. Now the depth, we wanted to do that really cool with the slider.
Oh yeah, we haven't seen this slider in action
Go
yet.
ahead and wire that up. And then we'll change the minimum to 0.01. And I want the maximum to be 5.
Sounds good.
And the steps to be, yeah, that sounds good. Let's make it like this,
Sure.
0.25. And I want the steps to be 0.25.
That's right. So that's not going to let you get within a quarter of a foot, I guess, if our Revit
Quarter of a
feet.
foot. So it'd be every 3 inches.
Yep. Yep.
It would be. And the minimum would be 3 inches. The maximum would be 5 feet.
That's right.
Now the model text type, that I had to figure out for my types that were already in there. But since we already did this once, I know it's called model text 1. But I'd have to put in a model text type
That's right.
because I need to feed it model text type by name.
Yeah, let's drop that one in.
Yeah, that seems correct. Yeah, that looks right. And so I want this.
Yep.
And because this model text is more than just a name, it actually has all of the settings in it, which font to use, how the font should look, and things like that. So that's how I'm thinking that's why I need this thing instead of just a string.
That's right. That's right. And this is pretty
Okay.
common in other types of Revit families also, not just model text. If you wanted to ask a
Right.
Revit file what types exist for, I don't know, generic models or curtain panels, one of the ways that you could find those family types is by typing in the name that you're looking for into a node like that, model text type by name, and it'll return that
Right.
that type.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're right, it's not asking for the name. It's asking for a very specific Revit family type.
Right. It's actually. Oh, look at that! It did it.
Hey, all right.
Hey, look out!
Hello world.
Hello world, look out! I'm somebody. Let's go to a 3D view. Where's my little? Oh, 3D view is probably under. Where'd it go? Oh, there it's under this guy.
You're not
There
used to
it
working
is.
with only half your screen, are you? I can't blame
I
you.
am not used to working with only half my screen. And my mouse keeps going away too. That's why it keeps flying all over the screen. And so there it goes up and down.
Oh,
Look at
cool.
that. I can get Hello World a lot more excited or not as excited. Pretty nifty.
So are you hooked? How cool is it to drag a slider around and see your
It is
text update
cool.
like that?
Right. And and so the things I learned today were start in the middle. So start with what you want to create
hmm
and then go back and fill in that information of those different things that it needs in order to create it. And that was one of my big hangups with trying to learn Dynamo.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And the other thing I learned today was the plus and the question mark and the lightning bolts. If I need to make sure I'm using the right one, if I want to get information, I would use a question mark.
Mhm.
If I wanted to put information, I would need a plus.
That's right. These red thunderbolts too. Those are usually used to perform an action. So now we were talking
Oh,
before
okay.
about what is this model text output thing
Oh,
about? Why?
right.
What do we do with that? A lot of times, if you're going to perform
Mhm.
an action on something that's already in Revit or something that's already in
Mhm.
Dynamo, usually those nodes have that red lightning bolt icon
Right.
next to them.
Or if I want to convert a double to a string or a string to a double.
That's
I
right.
don't know if you can convert a string to a double. You would use the lightning bolt.
Well, yeah. So you're if you wanted to round a double to the nearest
Yeah, divide
integer,
the string into segments. Right.
there you go.
So the,
Right,
the
right.
lightning bolt is a function,
That's
if
right.
you will.
Performs a function, performs an
Okay.
action. Exactly. So I'll tell
Right.
you what.
Well, very good.
So we now learned how to kind of spend a couple minutes making a Dynamo script that's going to
Mhm.
create a hello world, or I guess
Mhm.
any text for that matter, into your Revit scene. So of course that's spending a lot of
Mhm.
time putting a script together for something that actually in Revit would only take a couple of seconds, right? So
Right.
let me kind of take a higher level approach to why we would write a script like this in the first place, because this, as it is, probably isn't too it's not too realistic that
Mhm.
you would write a script for something like this. What you might be
Well,
interested
you
in
never
doing,
know.
yeah, you never know exactly, or you just want to look busy at your desk, so you open up Dynamo and start connecting these things, and anyone looking over your shoulder isn't going to know what you're doing, so you look really busy. That's I don't do that, and you shouldn't either. So that's my disclaimer. It's definitely not what I do at work. But maybe as an example for why you might build a script like this is perhaps there's somebody on your project team that doesn't work in Revit very frequently, or maybe there's a lot of text that you need to bring into a model text
Mhm.
family or something similar. So maybe what you could
Oh.
do is you could have someone on your project team type in whatever it is that they need to bring into the Revit environment in just like Notepad in a text editor or something.
Oh. Okay. So if I replace this string right here with that, with something that reads a text file, then it would write what it sees in the text file.
That's exactly right. So just like your
Okay.
slider was super adjustable, and when you made a change, the
Uh-huh.
height of the model text changed, we can swap out whatever that string input is for any other type of text, and it'll display as model text.
And when I use this read file?
So yeah, exactly. So you typed in text, and the first thing that comes up is read text. Yeah, perfect. So let's drop
Yeah.
that node into the
It read your mind.
beautiful.
Okay.
So you could see
So there's
here,
that.
yeah. So our
And now
it's
we need a
asking for
var.
a file. Oh yeah. So whenever you see that var fly out, it means there are various different types of inputs that it could
Oh,
take.
okay. So
Um,
it wants a file
I
name?
usually use the file path. Basically, what
Okay.
it's asking for is it's asking for a string that's pointing to a file somewhere on your computer. But this file path node, if you click the browse button, will let you pick and choose whichever file you want, and Dynamo in the background will
Okay.
just kind of type whatever string you need.
Well, let me make one real quick.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe not that.
Wow, that would be quite a bit of model text.
That would be a lot of model text.
Want to try
We'll
that
save
one
this
next?
to the desktop. Sure.
I'm kind
Text
of
file.
curious what that would
Text.
look like.
Okay.
So yeah, text file.
Me
Excellent.
too. All right. So we got our text file. I'll minimize that, and we'll go to our desktop, my desktop, not your desktop, and I'll click text file and then open. And now it's got the circle of life.
Let's see.
Okay.
Let's see. Before you plug that into model text, let's see what's coming out of that node in the
Okay.
preview, just to make sure that we got, hey, hello
Oh,
again.
okay.
Beautiful. Okay, so
Yep.
now we can be
All
confident that
right.
we're reading that file correctly.
Will work. Oh, would it blow up Revit if it wasn't reading it correctly?
It wouldn't blow up Revit, but you might get another yellow
Okay.
node, and your hello world in the background
Oh,
might
okay.
disappear.
Hey, look at that. Hello
Hello
again.
again.
All right, I'm going to try something interesting.
I like interesting.
I do too. Interesting is fun.
Curious what you have in my. Oh, that is interesting.
And then I'll save it. And how do I get it to reread?
What I usually do in this case, so Dynamo didn't recognize that you made a change. So
Right.
what I usually do in this case is I will unplug where your file path is plugged into the
Oh,
file read text. Yeah, right there. So this what we're essentially doing is rebooting the file read text node. So let's
okay. How
unplug.
do I
Oh,
unplug?
you can click once and then click off in space.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
There we
There, look
are.
at that. Wow. That's cool. Thank you, Ian.
Yeah, of course, you're welcome. This is a fun first installment in what I think could be a really exciting journey along the path to learning Dynamo.
This was great. So where can people find you on these interwebs?
You could find me on Twitter. You could find me on LinkedIn, and let's in the show notes if you thought this was
Mm-hmm.
interesting and are really interested in getting your very basics of Dynamo on. We'll also include a
Mm-hmm.
link to the Linda training, which will kind of get you up and
Right.
running with everything you need, and we'll also include a free Linda trial in there too.
Great. So thank you again for showing me how to do this. And next time, let's do something with area schedules, where we do a snapshot of area schedules.
All right, I'll brush
Okay?
up
All
on all
right.
those nodes related to area schedules then.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dynamo thinkers out there, and we hope you subscribe to the channel and watch all of the great episodes that we have.